What is a GFCI outlet and why is it important?
So a GFCI or a GFI, right? Some people will say ground fault circuit interrupter or a ground fault interrupter. Most electricians will say GFI, some say GFCI, it's whatever. But they both do the same thing. And you can have a GFI, I'll use the shortened term just because that's what I'm familiar with. A GFI typically is going to be found in your electrical panel. It's going to have a test and reset button on the breaker, or it's the outlet that's in most bathrooms, garages, your outdoor. Not all of those that are GFI protected have a test and reset because of how we're able to wire certain circuits without getting too technical. But there is a test and reset somewhere on every circuit that if you have a regular outlet outside, that test and reset is what affects that outlet down the circuit. So what they do is they check for micro voltages, okay, and that's as technical as I'm gonna get. And when something doesn't look right, it trips, okay. So GFIs actually came out, oh, maybe in the early 80s. I'm not 100% sure on that history, but I believe that is. And so, they came out to protect individuals who would be around water and have the ability to be electrocuted. So as soon as somebody was grounded with water, felt the voltage come, that GFI knows, hey, something's wrong, and it's immediate. There are two types of GFIs, okay? There's one that I'll call for humans, and there's another that's for equipment. The equipment are a little bit slower, okay, than the ones that are for humans, but it's still very quick, right? But they are not rated for human. You won't see receptacles that way or anything that can be confused for it. What you'll mainly see though is you're going to see a lot of outlets that way. There's only a couple, I think maybe one manufacturer that makes a breaker. This is very interesting, that makes a breaker that actually has an end of life. Okay. Most receptacles that are made now that are GFI all have an end of life. Okay. In the old, they said you had to test and reset them once a month to make sure that they work. Well, there was a reason for that, because what if they didn't show end of life, and they didn't work, right? That happens after things get old and they quit working. So now they make self-testing GFI receptacles that some test every second, some test 3 to 5 seconds. I mean, but it's constantly testing, okay? And so when those go bad, they're end of life, they can't be reset. You'll have to get somebody out and put in a new one. And I love that feature just because a lot of people think that they still have protection. So think about that circuit breaker you have in your panel that's 30 years old, that's a GFI, and you think you have GFI protection. Okay. When's the last time you hit the test button on that inside of your panel? Probably not in the 35 years it was there. So I like receptacles for that reason, because they now have an end of life. I've educated all of our technicians on how important that is, because nobody's sitting there walking around with their old GFIs going, yeah, it's that time of the month, let me go check them out. Just like your smoke detectors, right? Nobody's testing those on a
Just
monthly
annoying
basis,
and starts beeping. You just take the batteries
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Can you take that thing off the wall, by the way? No, I cannot. But yeah, hey, look, it may be going off for a reason. But yeah, so ground fault interrupters or ground fault circuit interrupters, they're a life-saving device. We check them every time we go into somebody's home. Highly recommended. If you have any service technician at your home electrically, make sure they're testing those. Mr. Sparky's happy to do it. We do small inspections all the time for homeowners on what you just said, smoke alarms. That's a life safety device, and GFIs is definitely a life safety device. And they've been implemented all over your home in new codes, right? So very important. And another thing that just happened a few years ago is now, GFIs used to be really for 120 volt circuits, which is a light switch or an outlet or something to that effect. But now a lot of your appliances now have to be GFI protected just because they do such a good job. And when you see things in the code book, understand that a lot of what happens in code comes from your insurance companies for a reason, because when they can see something and mandate that it be safer for us as the general public, then that's what they're doing, and that's why they're doing it, because of the safety factor there. But if you look at swimming pool equipment, I mean, you look at somebody building a swimming pool and all the things that could go wrong electrically with that, right? That's why GFI protection is just so important.
Now, when I think about the GFI protectant, like at our house, we don't have it on every single outlet. We only have it on certain outlets. Why is that? And do we need to have it on all outlets?
No, I don't think you should have it on all outlets. I mean, code does a very good job of mandating that. You're going to see GFIs in your kitchens. You're going to see them in your bathrooms. You're going to see them outside and in your garage, right? So, and I could be mistaken on this too, but a GFI was originally invented because of concrete, because concrete can be a conductor of electricity, right? And so that
Rebar,
GFI, what's that?
the rebar in there, right?
Yeah, well, just yeah, even if it doesn't have that, right,
Oh, wow.
it still could be a conductor. And so, I was told that's why the inventor of a GFI came away, because the conductivity of a piece of cement,
Oh, wow.
whether, with you on it, there's a circuit that drops, maybe it's wet. I don't know the exact thought process there, but I was told that's why they were invented, just because of the use of people being on concrete and the electricity issues there. But yeah, I mean, it's a great safety feature, but you don't need it in every outlet, right? Because again, your electrical system is designed to fail, but we want it to fail safely. And GFIs are part of the way that it can fail safely. So when you talk about a regular outlet, if that outlet is grounded properly, okay, doesn't mean that you're going to be protected from water, but it does mean that that circuit's grounded and that it's doing the right thing. You'll see some people use GFIs when they don't have a ground. Okay, so in some older houses, they didn't run a ground. Okay, well, I still want to be protected at the outlet. So, okay, well, we're going to make that a GFI outlet. Typically, that's the only time you're going to see them in an older home that has no grounds. People will use those GFIs because, again, it's measuring micro voltages between the two prongs, basically, just to keep that real simple.
Makes sense. Okay. What is an AFCI breaker and do I need one?
Yeah, you need those as well, right? So those came out, those have been out for quite a while now, 2026. I'd say those came out, early 2000s. And those are called arc fault circuit interrupters, okay? Again, some people say AFI, but AFCI is probably more common on that. It's newer. And you're really only going to see those for the most part. 98% of the time is going to be in a circuit breaker. They do make outlets that are arc fault protected, okay? But what that does is there's electronics in your circuit breakers now, and that is looking for any type of an arc on the circuit. So what's an arc on the circuit? Okay, well, an arc on the circuit, let's say you pull out your vacuum cleaner real quick and you see that spark, right? That's an arc. Well, not so much to protect you from that, but okay, so let's go inside of your wall. So we have electricians who are wiring the house, and they're hitting staples to hold that wire to the stud. But what if they hit the staple just a little too hard? Okay, they don't puncture or penetrate the actual wire jacket, but maybe they pinch it to where it's not the same gap on the insulation that it should be. So over time, you get what you call micro vibrations, just because electricity is always constantly moving. Okay, it's going to eventually, there could be a very small arc. Okay, arcs create a lot of heat, and heat causes fires, and we're behind a wall now. So this breaker has the ability to detect that there's an arc on that circuit and it trips. So I usually tell clients, look, arc fault breakers are like having the world's best electrician standing at your electrical panel 24/7. You got a problem. Click. I
That's
don't know
awesome.
where the problem is, but I know it's on this circuit. I'm cutting it off. And that's what's so great about them, right? Again, this is driven, again, like when we talk about code, code is really driven through safety from insurance companies. And so, look, if this is a hand, we use our hands as electricians. And when we're nailing in staples, if we nail them in too hard, okay, maybe there's an arc in the actual circuit somewhere, like a light bulb that's going bad. Those have even caused this. Some appliances back when these things came out created arcs in the actual electric engine, like a vacuum or a microwave or anything that has an electric motor that would have just the slightest arc. Man, these things were so problematic, and thank the Lord they got that fixed probably about 2008, 29, somewhere in there. They got that part fixed out, but the manufacturer of those appliances also were able to catch up with the technology. They did a bad rollout of that, but now, and a lot of electricians hated them just because of that. They were so problematic. But now, if you have somebody saying I wouldn't mess with those, they haven't messed with an arc fault lately. Arc faults are great items to have. They're recommended. They're not recommended. They're required by code. You can actually have a dual function arc fault GFI breaker as well that's doing both jobs. You see those in kitchens as well. And those have saved probably thousands of homes from fires just because of an arc, right? An arc creates heat, and it's intense heat, and it doesn't take much for an old stud to get hot, burn. Maybe you got some older insulation, what have you. So we recommend those even to the older homes. Like, it is good technology to have in your house. We put a lot of them in, even though the houses are older and didn't require when they were built. But man, it's just a great, great electrical safety product to put in your house.
Right on. When should I upgrade my electrical panel?
Well, it really depends. There's a lot of factors there. And so I would say, when should you replace it? Number one, obviously, if there's a problem, right? If you've got a power issue going on in your house, your electrical panel could easily be the culprit there. It's the heartbeat of your electrical system. And so some people get what they call, we'll call them a half power, or I don't have the circuit working, or, maybe your heating and air is not working. That's a big load, the stove, what have you. So, if you've got that problem, when you look at the electrical panel, an electrical panel needs to never be cleaned by any cleaning agent, right? I would even recommend never even using water on it, especially, obviously you'd never do any of this live. It's not recommended to clean any part of the electrical panel, right? Because when that bus, and that's where all of your breakers tie into the electrical, that bus can be compromised by any type of a chemical agent, whether we just talk about being in water, right? So, sometimes you'll see in a new home where you got a lot of paint overspray. Okay, well, that's, what's paint? Paint's also an insulator because it's vinyl, it's creating heat. But when you're looking at an electrical panel, if you're seeing small little pitting, if you're seeing discoloration, those panels need to be replaced, because the pitting is coming from arcing. The discoloration is coming from just the overall heat on that piece of metal. We've all seen metal that's been heated up and gets discolored. Okay. And you can tell that, right? So I'm not talking about an old looking bus bar in your panel. I'm talking about, you'll know the discoloration from the heat that's been put to that metal. So that's definitely a time to replace your electrical panel. Maybe you only have so many circuits in the electrical panel. Like, a lot of older homes may only have 20 circuits, and your home needs 30. Maybe it needs 40. Okay. So maybe it makes sense to replace that, Or maybe it makes sense just to add another smaller electrical panel to the side or to the area that maybe you're upgrading your home, maybe you're doing a renovation or something, and it just makes sense to upgrade. Okay, there are some panels that, that, I mean, sad to say, that are recommended to be replaced every 15 years, some manufacturers, and I'm not going to get on here and say who, but they, to me, that's absolutely crazy coming up in the trades. I'm older now. When they built electrical gear, when I got into the trade, man, it was built to last, right? And there's still a couple manufacturers out there that do a real good job with the products they produce. But, in some of the new track homes and that kind of stuff, it's all about getting that price point as low as possible. So, it's not that these panels aren't safe. Again, they're going to fail safely if it's done right. But, 15 years to me seems crazy. I don't want to take that chance. So, back to when should you replace it. So if you've got a problem or you're having issues, get somebody who's a professional with a trained eye to come look. And I'm not talking about a handyman. I'm talking about a certified, true professional electrician who knows what they're looking at, because this is your house, this is your safety, and that is the heartbeat of your electrical system in the house. It's the first place we typically go to when there's a problem in the home with any electrical. We're going to the electrical panel because we want to see how the heart's ticking, right? What's is it coming from the main source? So to me, that would be when I would upgrade my panel. Maybe I'm making an addition to the house. Maybe I'm just redoing my kitchen and I'm adding a lot of appliances, and I quite honestly don't either have enough electricity, so I need to go from a 200 amp service to a 400 amp service, right? But I'm not going to guess at that, Daniel. I'm going to make sure that we do what we call a load calculation to make sure that that's really what's needed, right? 180 amps on your 200 amp service is a lot of power, okay? 160 amps, a lot of power. Most people don't use anywhere near that during the day. But if you have a very large home that has a 200 amp service and you didn't have a lot of appliances in your kitchen, then it may be time to upgrade, right? And when I say a lot of appliances, I mean, think about when you and I were probably growing up, you had a coffee pot. Most people didn't even have a microwave back in those days. That I'm really showing our age now, but so now you have a coffee pot, you've got an air fryer, you've got a countertop oven. You may have a double oven now. You may have a trash compactor. You may have an ice machine.
Blender.
Yeah. I mean, you may have even a small water heater underneath your sink just because you want hot water that quick, right? Like the amount of power that we want to consume is high. So, that's another good reason to think about getting an upgrade on electrical power for sure.
No, that's good. All great reasons. Next question is, how do I know if my home is outdated electrically?
Well, one of the first things to do, how old is your home, right? So did they run grounds? We talked about that in another episode. Like grounding is number one, the most important safety feature your home can have electrically. You have got to be grounded. They ran a lot of circuits back in the day with no grounds. So do you not have a grounding system on all your receptacles? That's a very easy telltale sign. Federal Pacific panels, a Federal Pacific panel is definitely a no-go. All you have to do is Google Federal Pacific electrical panels. I don't know any homeowners insurance that will actually insure a house that has a Federal Pacific panel. So that's an easy look. If you've got a Federal Pacific, give us a call. We'll be happy to come out and talk to you about the safety of that panel and how bad you need to get it replaced. Those were the original arc breakers. And I didn't say arc fault, I said arc because they never tripped when there was a problem, no matter how much power was running through them, right? We had an incident the other day, and I won't be long with it, but guy said, "Hey man, I've got a problem with my circuit." A tech arrives and he looks at the voltage, and I'm like, isn't that funny? You were able to look at the voltage when you knew it was bad and the circuit breaker was still on, right? Like that,
Wow.
that's a no-brainer. They need to replace their electrical panel. They've got absolutely no protection. And so that would definitely be the case there. If you've got old knob and tube wiring, that's where you may have a real old house, like a house that may date back to 100 years, 80 years, somewhere in that 100 to 80 years, you could still see knob and tube wiring, and that's where both conductors will run separated. You'll have a ceramic holder that holds wires separated running through an attic. If you have rag wire, which is a cloth wire, it's probably a good idea to look and see what the feasibility of that is, of having that replaced and rewired and upgraded for sure, just because it deteriorates over time. And it literally, you don't have to touch it. Just eventually, it just disintegrates. It falls away from old age, exposing bare wires. And again, if a bare wire comes close to a piece of metal, and then you're going to create that arc right there, and arcs create heat. So those are real good reasons to have your home electrically updated, and plus, I mean, insurance companies are really starting to look at that. Like they want to see those home improvements. So by doing that, you're probably going to get a nice savings on your homeowner's policy for sure. But you want to definitely, just to recap, you want to look at your grounds, the age of the entire system. What does the wiring look like? Is it that old, right? I mean, I'm 53 years old. Doesn't seem that old to me, especially. But if your wiring's 53 years old, I mean, is it still safe? Get us out there to take a look. I mean, I don't want to rip into anybody's walls if we don't need to, but maybe you need to just be educated so you have a peace of mind. So I definitely recommend getting us out, just taking a look. If maybe we charge you for a small inspection on that just because of the depth that we have to go through. But if it's for your peace of mind, I definitely recommend it.
No, that's good. That's definitely good. So here's the next question. Can I add more outlets without major work?
Where are they, Daniel? That's an open question right there. It just depends on where the receptacles are located, right? And what aesthetic are you willing to put up with for the ease of adding extra outlets, right? Because outlets are typically they're recessed into homes. So, you have to go through stud bays inside the walls to move them down. Now, let's say it's a garage and you don't want to put too much money in and you're okay with a piece of surface mounted conduit that's going to protect the wiring. Not that bad, not going to be that crazy. But yeah, you can add outlets everywhere. We do a lot for Christmas lights, right? Like if you're running extension cords anywhere in your house, you need to add outlets. Okay. Just because number one, it's a trip hazard. But number two, extension cords are not made typically for full-time use. Okay. Even though they may be rated for it, it's just a bad practice because if somebody can trip on it, yank the plug out of the socket, then you've got damage there. You may have damage on the actual cord. Somebody could get electrocuted, what have you. But you can typically add outlets, especially vertically, right? Like, where's that important? Well, hey, man, I want to hang my TV on the wall and I don't want to see an outlet and I don't want to see the cord coming down. Okay, well, then let's find out what outlet you want and let's see if we can just go straight up the wall vertically. Not a problem. But really, it just really depends on where you want the outlets to be added.
So when you're saying the
And again,
garage, you're saying
what's
the
that?
garage, you're saying there's outlets where you see like the wire come down the wall and there's an outlet that sticks out. Is that what you're talking about? That it's a
Well,
cheaper
you wouldn't have
option?
wire exposed anywhere to where it could get damaged,
Okay,
right? So we
gotcha.
would run a piece of conduit to protect that wire. And depending on where it's at, right? Like, just you'd need some kind of a protective jacket that's going to protect the wiring inside of the conduit or MC cable, depending on where it is and how it's located. But yeah, look, if let's say you've got a workbench at home. All right, and I just want to add some more outlets. Number one, can I add an outlet right beside the outlet that's there by making it a double outlet? More than likely I can, depending on what side of the stud I'm on and how the house was built. And another good thing a lot of people don't realize is, they do make an item called plug mold. Okay, and let's just say that it's 3 feet long, and it has an outlet every 12 inches, right? So you get three outlets there, they're grounded, and that goes back into the outlet that you have just to add an outlet. You definitely don't want to overload that by adding more outlets just to that. But I mean, if you're keeping it within reason, and if you've got a 15 amp circuit breaker and it is 12 amps, it's probably going to trip, right? But you have access to more outlets. Extension cords, they're good, but they're temporary.
Yeah, right on. What's involved in installing EV chargers at homes?
Yeah, it's a lot more than just putting an outlet in your home. An EV charger, and man, have they gained in popularity. They're pretty convenient, especially depending on where you live. But there's a lot more to just somebody coming in and you've got a charger and we're going to add an outlet for that charger to plug into, right? That's a big load. Okay. Now, if you're just using the cord that comes and you're plugging it into a normal outlet, 120 volt, obviously there's not much to that. That's a very slow charge. But most people today they want a quicker charge, right? So now we're going to bump it up into amperage. Our voltage is increasing. And remember, this is a constant load, a constant heavy load. Okay. So, when you use your stove, okay, stoves are typically 50 amps, but you're not using all 50 amps. Even if you have all four burners on and your oven, you're typically still not getting close to the 50 amps. You may be getting up there, but you're not there. And who uses four burners in their oven on high at the same time? Not many people.
Around
Even
Thanksgiving.
during Thanksgiving, because you're not cooking on the back, cooking on the front, got a turkey in the oven. But an EV is plugged into the car and it's sucking as much power as it can because those lithium batteries are needing they need the juice, right? So it's a constant heavy load on that receptacle. So it's got to be rated for continuous duty. I can't tell you how many outlets we've come across that people use the stove outlet just because it's 50 amp stove outlet. But guess what? It wasn't rated for continual duty and they just melt because that's how hot it gets. We use a special form of wire as well because, again, we're constant duty here. That thing's got to be able to work for umpteen hours straight and not get overheated. So there's a lot that goes into that, right? So, every car manufacturer may have a little different twist. Their amperage requirements may be a little different. So you definitely need to get an electrician who knows what they're doing. This is not a handyman job at all. That's where we've probably seen most of our issues, I would hope. But even then, in the beginning of EVs, a lot of electricians weren't educated and didn't realize that this is a continuous duty. You have to increase the load so that it stays cooler. It's not, hey, I need a 60 amp outlet. Okay, well, I've got to rate that for 60 amp continuous duty. So there's a multiplier effect that electricians are going to use there to make sure that we're using the proper gauge wire, we're using the proper insulation of the wire, we're using the proper receptacle, right? And we're meeting that manufacturer's specs, because if that's done wrong and you damage your car or you catch your garage on fire, right, because you didn't want to get a professional out there, it's just not good. You want to make sure you spend extra money on that big investment you just made to make sure that it's done right. And if you're going to do that, you might as well add a surge protector to boot on that to protect what you're charging, right? Very important. That's a big, heavy, static load, very resistant like a heat, because you're like, it's no different than a stove, right? It heats. And so you just got to be real careful with who you're using for your EV chargers. We've installed several, if not thousands, definitely above 1,000 of them, just because people trust us. We know what we're doing, and we're going to back up the work that we do. We've been doing it for a long time. We've done every model out there from Tesla, Ford, Chevy, Nissans, you name it, we've done. And so we've got a lot of experience with putting EV chargers in.
Awesome.